All right, our final video is going to be talking about the layers of the earth and how we know what they're made of. So the layers of the earth are determined based on composition. What? Composition? We've been talking about that since like the second week of school. If you forgot though, composition is what a substance is made of. So the layers of the earth are separated because they're made of different things. That's all composition is just the different layers are made of different stuff. So if you look at this density column here, we've got these materials separated because they're made of different things. They have different densities. So dish soap here is sitting underneath water, which means it's more dense. It's sunk further down. Honey, all the way down here at the bottom, it's got sugar in it. It's got more complex particles, so it sinks all the way down. So that's basically what happened on our planet too. We had really dense material that sunk to the core. And we had really light materials like our crust and our atmosphere and water that kind of float on top. So that's what we determine the different layers are. We just determine them based on their composition. Now, another good question is, how do we know what they're made of? Right? We've never been to those different layers, so how do we know what's happening inside of our planet? And the best answer for that is seismic waves. So seismic waves are just waves of energy. They're created by earthquakes. So every time there's an earthquake, boom, it sends these waves of energy through our planet. And if there's an earthquake here, we have different seismometers or seismographs that are measuring those waves all around our planet. And by measuring the time between those waves and what kind of waves make it all the way across, we can get an idea of the different materials that are inside of our planet. Every material allows energy to be transferred at a different rate. So by measuring those rates, we can figure out roughly what the interior of our planet is made of. So the different layers are determined based on composition. We know the composition based on these seismic waves and how fast they go through the different layers of our planet. These notes can be found, or these answers can be in your intro to layer notes, by the way. Intro to Earth's layers. So if we're to review the different layers of the actual Earth, right, we got the crust is on top, and it's our thinnest layer. That's where we live. It's the least dense. That's why it's floating up on top. We do have oceanic and continental crust. We talked about that in a previous video. Oceanic crust is denser. It's underneath the water. It's thinner, made of basalt, whereas continental crust is thicker, made of granite, and it rides up nice and high because it's less dense. Now, once we get underneath that crust, we have the mantle. The mantle can be broken down into several different layers, actually. And that's because it behaves a little bit differently. The lithosphere, for instance, remember that's what makes our tectonic plates. That's made of the crust and the top rigid layer. The lithosphere is just like the hard as rock portion of our Earth. So it's going to be super rigid, super hard. And the reason why the lithosphere is considered the crust and the mantle is because it's super hard. But the bottom part of the lithosphere, where it is the upper mantle, has a different composition. So that's why it has its own name. That's why it has its own specific designation. Now, underneath that, if we go a little bit deeper in the mantle, we're going to get the asthenosphere. And that's the plasticky mantle where convection currents occur. It's where it's hot enough for it to flow a little bit like a plasticky substance, but it's not too hot to make it just kind of be less, or it's not too hot so that it just sinks to the bottom. So we got the asthenosphere and lithosphere. They're parts of the mantle. And then we have the lower mantle, which we don't really talk about much. There's not much that happens there. Underneath that, we have our outer core, which is liquid iron nickel. It's the only liquid part of our planet. And that's due to really intense heat. It's so hot that those molecules have enough energy to be in a liquid state. But then as we go further down to the inner core, it's also iron and nickel, but there's so much pressure that it slams those particles into a solid state. So the outer core made of the exact same thing, except it doesn't have enough pressure to make it a solid, so it's a liquid. Inner core, iron nickel, it's solid due to really, really intense pressure, slamming those particles to be right next to each other. Now, if I want to figure out how can I identify these different layers, right? Like if I'm not always seeing the same picture or same diagram of our planet, and that's okay. What you can do is always look for those visual cues. The thinnest layer, the one that's on the outside, kind of like pizza crust, is always going to be crust. So this light green here, boom, that's crust. Then underneath that, we've got this maroon color. That's our mantle. And that's specifically the mantle and not the asthenosphere or the lithosphere. The way that I can identify the asthenosphere always is arrows like this. This is identifying our convection currents. So these arrows are going to be our asthenosphere. Sphere. And then my lithosphere is going to be a little bit of the crust and then the top part of the mantle. It'll always have a bracket because it consists of two parts. It's not just the outer layer. It's not just the mantle. It's a little bit of both. So that's why you typically see those brackets. Then our innermost layers, those are hopefully pretty easy to identify. We have our inner core, which is on the inside, and we have our outer core just beyond that. And that is the layers of our planet. Yeah, good stuff. Hopefully these videos helped. If you need anything, send me an email. Good luck on your study guide. Fill it out thoughtfully. This is the best review you can do to be prepared for the test next week. You got this, everybody. Good luck.